the guitar world's Acoustic Nation. My name is Lily Maase. I'm a New York City-based session guitarist and teacher. I've been teaching professionally for over 15 years. I do a lot of things to make a living in New York. I play Telecaster in a few different country groups. I play the role of Slash in an all-female Guns N' Roses tribute called the Rocket Queens, and I have an avant-garde record with my own group, The Sweet Unraveling, coming out this fall. This is the second in a 5-part series called Get Better Faster. Everything your teacher should have shown you but probably didn't. I'm sitting here with my student Wes, who's been taking lessons from me for about 4 months. Last time we got together, we talked about organizing his hands so that he could move from chord to chord, and I made a couple of minor adjustments to him, and then he was magically able to do this. There are a lot of pieces that go into getting to that point. It's not just as simple as dropping your thumb down. So let's talk about how to build that foundation up in a proper way. The first thing is just getting your fingers connected to each other, to the guitar, and to your hands. So let's take this same concept that you just had and let's break it down to one note.
Okay.
Okay, so take your first finger. You want to drop your first finger on the low E string, which is your lowest sounding string, that is the highest string in direction. You want to drop it just behind the fret. If you're in front of the fret, you end up damaging the quality of the note. If you're too far back, you're pushing down harder for the same result. So you want to locate your fingertip right behind the fret. You want to take your thumb and put it in that same position where your thumb is straight and it's more or less under your finger. Now, one thing I want to point out is that a lot of people are confused about where their fingertips actually are. The fingertip, which is pretty broad, when we talk about the fingertip in the guitar, we're talking about the space just underneath the nails. So a lot of times people come at the instrument with their fingers a lot straighter. It makes it very difficult to be accurate. It really promotes all of this hunching up that we have. If you use the very tip of your finger, it means your finger is going to be very, very curved, which might feel unnatural, but it's actually what you want your fingers to do. When you do that, when you curve your finger, a lot of times your thumb will come up and bend too, because your thumb thinks that it's part of the hand. So you want to take a minute to remember that you can control your thumb without changing your fingers. That looks pretty good. Okay, so in the right hand, let's go ahead and just work on some basic alternating. With your right hand, I want you to play just that note as a downstroke and an upstroke and a downstroke and an upstroke. So 4 times total. Exactly. Now, without disturbing the position of your hand, take your second finger to the second fret. Your first finger doesn't have to stay in place, and do the same thing. Now you might see there that your thumb's gotten a little bent, so you want to straighten your thumb out. Your thumb actually doesn't lose its position. Third finger to the third fret. Okay, so right there, you see how your thumb's moving along with your finger? I want you to imagine that it's still supporting your first finger. So draw it back. Very good. That looks great. Try that again. Okay, so right here you can see how uncomfortable this is. His fingers and hand are really tight, his thumb is really crunchy, he's basically going like this. So what we're going to do, instead of focusing on the fingers, which is what most people do, is try to organize everything else so that he has room to move his hands. We're going to start with his shoulder. So we're going to pull your shoulder up here. When that happens, your arm goes up off your leg because putting your arm down into your leg just causes tension, it keeps your hand from moving freely. Now we're going to drop your thumb. When we drop your thumb, we want to see a straight line from your wrist to your elbow to your shoulder, and that allows your bicep and your shoulder muscles to take over most of the work. Now what happens a lot of the time is, if you'll turn your hand, Wes, when we drop the thumb, the hand doesn't come with it. The hand ends up squeezing into the guitar. All this does, even though you give yourself the impression that you're using a lot of muscle, all this does is cut your fingers off from the rest of your arm. So what we're going to do is drop this part of the hand, and you should feel like you can balance a ping pong ball or something very soft in there. So let's go ahead and pull this back now. Go ahead and do the same thing. Great. So I still do this every day. If I do it every day, I notice that my technique never gets any worse, even if I have a couple of days where I'm traveling or a busy day where I teach more than I practice. I do it on every single string, 4 notes at a time, going down to the high E string and back up. And then I do everything 2 notes at a time. Wes, would you go ahead and demonstrate that now? Okay, that was better, but your thumb came along with you. Can you slow down a little bit? We have a tendency, especially when we're starting, to feel like faster is better. Faster is not always better. In fact, a lot of times faster is just faster. The faster we go, the more likely it is that we're going to get into these habits that actually slow our hands down, and then they become a part of our playing. If we are willing to slow down when we first start playing and really get this stuff set up and organized, the progress that you'll see in the long term will be much, much faster. A lot of students who skip this step, and a lot of teachers who allow their students to skip this step because they want to teach their students things that will keep business. For instance, songs, things out of pop music, sort of those iconic guitar things. A lot of teachers allow their students to pick up bad habits, and then students do what I call hitting a wall, which is to say you get to a certain point where you feel like you're fighting your hands, and then you either give up or you stop progressing. This is one of the things that you can do to ensure that that won't happen to you, and it may be a little more painstaking on the front end of things, but the payoff in the end is much larger. So slow down. Try to keep your thumb So I'll do that 2 notes at a time. And then I'll go back and I'll do it 1 note at a time, still alternating in my right hand. So my first note will be a down, my second note will be an up, my third note will be a down, my fourth note will be an up. Let's try that one more time.